listening to Evergreen Media Network. I am Cindy Schwartz, and this is the Patient Partners Show. Jeannie Roller is my co-host, and we are talking today, Jeannie, as a follow-up to a podcast we did a little while ago about a procedure that was done to a female patient in Texas at a standalone clinic that her insurance company had recommended her specifically to go to that clinic as one of the options. And, whatever research that person did, we talked about that on the other podcast. You do the best that you can. Sometimes you don't always know the questions to ask, but you want to take it for granted when you really can't. We found that out the hard way. Take it for granted that what you see is what you're getting, and you are getting a qualified medical person to do these procedures. In this case, it was a CRNA that, in all intents and purposes, is supposed to be followed or guided by an actual medical doctor or medical surgeon, if you will. And it didn't seem to be the case in this instance, and different things like that. So the person died after being brought to a hospital facility from the clinic. And we now would like to talk about what was the follow-up for the things that went wrong in that procedure and what really the accountability is, because we know, and of course on this podcast we say this all the time, these are our opinions and we come by them by what we read in these stories and the research that we do with them, knowing what happened to us and what happened with other people that we have interviewed on this podcast. And this is around the country, around the world. We've had doctors on, medical people, that things don't really, it kind of gets schlepped underneath the rug. We didn't do this. That's what I was told by my Orlando hospital. We did not do that, and blah, 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 blah. And it gets long gone, blowing in the wind, and nobody seems to get sanctioned. And if the person does sue, most often, I think in this case, you'll say, Jeannie, it was not a malpractice suit. It didn't get to that. Mm-hmm. It was some kind of it was a settlement. So when you do a settlement, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a doctor, but as far as I know, when you do a settlement, that's it. You cannot talk about it, and you take the money and you walk away, and that's the end of it. So what does anyone do in the arena of accountability with this situation? Was that CRNA sanctioned? Was their license taken away? Was some kind of review done? Was that state's Department of Health notified? And then do they just up and leave and go? And we did a show about that, or a couple of shows about a nurse that went to 10 different hospitals, and each one that nurse went to were things that happened in that hospital because the history of that nurse did not follow that person forward. So all the people that person came in contact with at facility A, B, C, D, Q, W, X, and all of that, they were under the literally knife and trauma, whatever, of that nurse going forward because nothing happened. They were allowed to practice. Their license wasn't taken away. There was nothing. And we see that over and over again. I mean, when you can mention how many cases, very prominent cases, that there were 40 women, there were 75 men that finally got together and something happened. Why is it to that point? What's the stopgap? What's the divining intervention, if you will, is what we need, really, divine intervention in some of this stuff that stops this and says, okay, this is screwed up. Let's fix this. Jeannie, your thoughts?
Well, I wanted to go back on something that we talked about previously in the other podcast, is that when my husband was in an actual hospital, he did not know at the time that he didn't see an actual doctor in the morning rounds. And this story also, the lady who died, she did not know that the man she was dealing with was not an actual doctor. Mm-hmm. He wore a white coat. There was no identifying name tag or anything like that. The same with my husband. He didn't know that he was seeing PAs. He thought he was seeing doctors because, there's a doctor's name written on the board. They come in a white coat. They just act like a doctor. They don't say, hey, I'm just a PA. So, if you go to your doctor's office, you probably will know that you're dealing with an NP or PA. But when you're in a clinic setting or a hospital setting, my advice is always to ask the people, what what is your qualification?
If you're
Are you a doctor or-
if you're able to do that. Yeah.
If you're able, yeah, right. The other thing I wanted to mention is that um, in the medical profession, just like any other profession, there are issues with substance abuse. In this case, there may have been. There is not any hard evidence because it is so difficult to get this nailed down sometimes because of the medical boards. They don't always come to a conclusion about this, or if the person leaves and goes to another state, then that stops any action against that person in that state. So, if your person is under the influence and they're taking breathalyzer tests to see if they can work that day, there's a problem.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you as a patient, you don't have any idea who these people are that you're trusting with your life.
Right.
You're just hoping for the best. But, it is scary because a lot of times these people have access to drugs that can make them high, that can alter their minds. It is some scary stuff. You really don't know. I mean, I've read several stories about doctors and nurses who've been under the influence while doing surgeries or patient care. This should not be happening. There needs to be a system, in my opinion, in place to test them periodically, and it needs to be an unbiased testing facility that's not connected with the hospital or the medical system.
Yeah.
That to me is scary. It is scary that these people can be contract workers, and when you go to Discovery to get the information for a malpractice case, that these clinics or hospitals even can say, well, they're not our employee.
Right.
We don't have their personnel records because they are contract. That is scary. I know a lot of hospitals around here do that. They use contract employees. They go through a service and they hire these people. So if there is a problem, who's in charge of them?
Right.
It's what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's a scapegoat situation, if you will, in my opinion. And that's so true. So you're saying that you're praying for the best of what you see as that patient going into this facility. That's even more, an incentive isn't even the strong enough word, an obligation, an insistence that this is vetted to the highest max. You're dealing with people's lives here. This is vetted to the highest max you can get. There shouldn't be anything low. It should be the best that you can possibly. I don't care who the patient is. Not if you have the best insurance, or if you have the best this and that and the best that. No, that doesn't even factor into it. You do this the best that you possibly can, because there are so many people that are doing that. So don't tell me you cannot do that and still make money if at the end of the day, that's what the bottom line is for your facility or your office to make money. Yeah, I know everybody has to make money. You are in business to do that. But if it's been proved in other places that does work, where they treated people with respect and dignity, and they're still thriving and surviving and making money and, going forward, then it's possible. So figure it out the right way. Don't figure it out the wrong way and use the people as your scapegoats and as your whatever charges.
Right.
Come on.
Right.
There's no other answer. There is, in my mind, in my opinion, whatever you want to call it, there is no other answer. That's the answer. Do it the right way, or just don't do it at all, because there's too much riding on it. And we are not, as people of the human race, expendable. We're not. You do this the right way, and you need to be held. You people that have gone to medical school or whatever, you signed all the oaths, you said all the stuff. You need to be held to a higher standard, because you are afforded that higher standard because of who you are. So you don't take that for granted. On that note, stay listening to Evergreen Media Network.